sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality and our continuation of Secular Sexuality Sex Work September series. It's a lot of S's. I'm Bianca, and with me today, as always, is the luxurious lumbersexual Christy Powell, who, guys, it's Christy's and Secular Sexuality's 2-year anniversary.
Woo!
Woo! I'm happy to be here, and Christy, thanks for holding down the fort as well as you do and continuing to show up every week. It's amazing to be on a show with you.
Thank you so much. That's a great graphic, y'all. I appreciate that.
With us tonight, we are bringing you some sexy and practical conversations with an internationally known escort, Alice Little.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Alice Little. I'm a legal sex worker, sex educator, and intimacy expert. I've been in the sex work industry for the past 5 years now as a sex worker. And before that, I was a BDSM educator and traveled around the country doing different educational events.
That is awesome. And you are here to educate all of us tonight. What are we going to talk about today, Christy?
Yeah, I'm already getting a little bit hot under the collar on this anniversary episode. We're going to be talking about Alice's illustrious career, from flirting and foreplay to lectures on the science of sex and the state of sex work during COVID, plus tips and tricks and practical advice for anyone out there thinking about hiring a luxury escort. So hit us up. We're at 512-991-9242, or you can call the show at tiny.cc/callsex because the show is starting right now.
All right. As we're waiting for those calls to fill up, guys, seriously, this is a big opportunity to talk with somebody who knows a lot about what they're doing. So call in. Let's start with the basics. What is a luxury escort?
That's a great question. So a luxury escort is somebody who connects with someone on a far deeper level than just skin deep. So what I do addresses somebody's intimate needs, their social needs, their emotional needs, and of course, their sexual needs too. It's an incredible way to connect with people, learn more about myself, and of course, a great way to experience intimacy with others.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you got started? I know you said you started out kind of being a sex educator, BDSM expert, and then kind of segued your way into sex work itself. And can you give us a little bit of that history there?
Of course. It's quite a funny story. I found the world of legal sex work in Nevada by way of being a sex educator. So I was traveling around the country, like I mentioned earlier, and at one of those events, a fellow educator shared with me information about working at the legal brothels. It sounded really intriguing, interesting, and so I decided to look it up on my phone, and I was so delighted with everything I saw that I decided to apply, and within 72 hours, purchased a flight and was on my way to go work in Nevada for the first time.
Damn.
Yeah, it was kind of like jumping in with both feet. It was like, it seems like it could be a good fit. This will be a great fit. Yes, I will do this now. And I never looked back 5 years later.
Oh, that's awesome. That reminds me of how I decided to come to Austin. I was like, never been, don't know anybody. Let's do this.
You know, you can tell that the show is maturing and growing up into its 2 years because of all the puns we just let pass right there. We're probably gonna have to do like a bonus episode where we just go back and dissect that last sentence. But that's incredible that you had the bravery to say, this is something I'm interested in. I'm gonna learn more about it, and now I'm gonna be the best at it.
Well, it didn't quite work out that way. The focus was never on being the best or the most or anything of that nature. My focus initially was just on learning more about it, myself, about intimacy, how different people experience it, how different people fulfill their needs, and what my role can kind of look like within that space.
And did it feel like a natural fit right away? Did it feel kind of like, oh yes, this is where I'm supposed to be, and I kind of have everything I need going in, or did you feel kind of overwhelmed at first? How was that first maybe 3-6 months?
I have to say, it was kind of strange. It was almost like a duck taking to water, in the sense that I looked back on my strange life experience of being a sex educator and helping out with various small businesses. And it's like, everything in my strange life has led up to this perfect moment here. I have found the thing I've been looking for. And it's just been kind of a match made in heaven for me.
That is awesome. And you do have quite a few specialties. I was going through your website in preparation for this interview and kind of looking at the various things that you offer. And there are very many, and we don't have time to get into all of them, but I kind of picked 3 that I really found interesting and wanted to know more about. So the first thing is the GFE, the girlfriend experience. So can you give us an idea of what that is specifically, and also maybe why one would seek that particular specialty out?
Yes. So GFE, or the girlfriend experience as it's better known by, refers to a connection that goes far beyond just sex. I essentially step into the role of being somebody's girlfriend, and I look to fulfill their needs far beyond the sexual. I'm a companion. I'm there to spend time with them, connect with them, share in their hobbies and interests, be there to hold them if they're going through something that's difficult or challenging, help answer their questions, help be a friend. It's so many different things kind of all rolled into one. And it's hard to say that the girlfriend experience looks like one specific thing, because it's so customized and unique to the individual. As to why somebody might choose to have the girlfriend experience with a luxury companion, it's because they're not getting those needs met somewhere else in their life, or they're not really sure what a healthy quality relationship can look like. You figure for many of us, we don't really get to see good quality relationships. They don't show it on TV. We don't read about it in books. All we see are like these examples of dysfunctional people and poor ways of communicating and not very good practices in the bedroom. And so I kind of like to flip that on its head and give people the opportunity to experience good quality intimacy.
That is so interesting. I was mulling about it, and I was trying to figure out exactly, kind of predict what you were going to say. And honestly, I will admit, I did not even think about that particular element of being able to say, hey, maybe you haven't had good experiences with a relationship, or maybe the relationships you have observed or been a part of have given you a bad taste, or in some way skewed your idea of what it is. And you kind of reset that. And I'm sure that this also plays into the whole education and coaching element as well, which is kind of where I'd like to move us next. I know that you do a lot of coaching and a lot of educating around sex and BDSM and consent and all of this. So can you talk a little bit about maybe this more academic side of things?
Yes. So our country is god-awful when it comes to sex education.
Yep.
We're virtually non-existent. We don't have any quality sex ed. If anything, we have this tendency to give misinformation in school rather than anything of quality. And as a result of that, we're left very ill-informed as to how to have a good quality sex life as an adult. I mean, I don't know about the two of you, but when I was in sex ed, the phrase women's pleasure was never even mentioned, like not even once. Once. We didn't talk about it. It was entirely non-existent. And through my work at the ranch, I found this real need for better education. People want to understand these things, but they're a little bit too shy, perhaps, to ask their existing partner or some random stranger on the internet, hey, so how do I actually find that and then they whisper it like it's a bad word. Like, no, that's okay. I got you. You don't need a roadmap. Like, it's cool. Put down the notebook. You don't need to break out pen and paper here. Like, let me teach you the magical, mystical ways of good quality sex. I promise it's real. It exists, and it's nowhere near as complicated as you think it is. And so it kind of naturally ended up becoming something that I was known for. Previously, I was teaching BDSM-focused topics, but it wasn't really just BDSM. I was doing conversations on non-monogamy, conversations on consent, and a lot of that information also follows suit when it comes to intimacy. How do you find out what your partner likes in the bedroom? Easy. You ask them. They will tell you. They know the answer. I don't know the answer. I'm not a psychic. I can't tell you what your partner's into, but I can tell you how to get that answer, though. And I oftentimes am able to do so.
Wonderful. And can we talk a bit just about, because I know that you said you started out kind of before you got into it yourself, you were discussing it, you were speaking on it, you were educating people about these various subjects. How did you come to that as an interest? Was it something you studied in school, or did you self-educate after, finding out, hey, this is something I want to know more about? How did you get to the point where this was your area of expertise?
Well, it's funny you mentioned school. I didn't necessarily study it in school, but I sure studied it a whole lot after school. When I was in college, my roommates had a whole bunch of leather gear, like a whole lot of leather gear. I mean, like the entire back section of the closet, I distinctly remember it being just like black with leather and silver with chains and metal, and I was like, "Ooh, what's this about?" And they were like, and I'm like, "No, what is this about?" Like, I think whatever that is, I'm into it. Okay. And come to find out, one of their parents owned a BDSM dungeon in New York. Of course, I proceeded to pester the crap out of them until I was able to get a job there. I started out at the front desk, scheduling appointments for different folks that were coming in. I was setting up the educational track. And then, of course, I was getting to just hang out in the dungeon, go to all the classes. And in between people's sessions, I'd go to the dungeon. I'd be practicing different skills. And I got really into it. I eventually ended up picking up and teaching a class on flogging completely by accident. The presenter, unfortunately, was snowed out of New York, and I had a classroom full of people, and there was no teacher, and it was something I was pretty A-okay at. I was already familiar with a lot of the motions for flogging. It's the same motions that we use in fire play, and, well, I'm like, all right, I can probably teach a class. I can probably wing this. I've been here, for a minute now. I can do this. And apparently I did a good job because I was then invited to present at another location. And then I was invited to present at another event. And then things just kind of took off on their own, real crazy like.
Wow, that is amazing. I grew up very sheltered, very conservative Christian, and I went to a Christian university, and I cannot imagine where my mind would go if my roommate had a bunch of leather gear in the closet. That to me just, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And then I guess finally for this first segment, you did touch on this a little bit, I think, with your discussion about the girlfriend experience, but I noticed that you also offer some therapeutic offerings as well. So you've got the more intimate aspect with you as a intimate partner, as a companion. You've got the educational aspect here, and now you've also kind of got the psychological, the therapy aspect. And can you give us an idea of the kinds of things that you talk about with people who want to set up an appointment with you?
Yes. Unfortunately, many people have been deeply wounded in a sexual manner or wounded in an intimate manner where either they've had their trust broken, they've had a bad experience sexually, whatever it so may be, they've had something happen in their lives and they need somebody else to help them process everything that's happened. Of course, it can be very difficult to go to, say, a conventional therapist and process through, hey, I want to get comfortable with the idea of being kissed and being held and being touched. you can't really just go into your therapist and practice kissing your therapist. I mean, that is not the right place or time for it. However,
Christy's just like, well, I mean.
Yeah, that's a hard pass for me, dog. I'm always eager to be having those conversations, but we're talking about different kinds of therapy. Talk therapy is great and helps you to get to the root of an issue, but there's nothing that replaces the experience of actually allowing your body to move through those types of movements. It can be incredibly therapeutic to practice, so to speak.
And I'm a safe person to practice with. It's 100% consent all the way. Everything is going to be happening at a slow, consensual pace. I've gotten to spend time with folks who are recovering from just the most horrific of circumstances, things that I've never been through and hope to God I never have to go through. But I feel privileged and lucky that I'm able to help somebody overcome some of those difficulties, and that they trust me to explain not just the root cause, but then put themselves in a situation where they're vulnerable and they could potentially be setting themselves up to relive some of those experiences, and helping them move past it and help replace some of the negative thoughts and feelings with more positive ones, and slowly but surely create a new foundation in which they now get to go forth and have this amazing, wonderful, intimate relationship with others.
That is awesome. It sounds luxurious, for lack of a better word. That is awesome. Guys, we would love to talk with you about anything relating to these topics. Are you interested in what the girlfriend experience might be like? Are you interested in maybe finding somebody who would be right for you in that capacity? Or maybe, you have a question about BDSM. We've got a great resource here on the line. So call in. In the meantime, though, I do want to move into kind of how quarantine and this pandemic is impacting sex work, especially the more in-person kind. I know we've had some people on, Rudy, for example, who primarily does their work online, primarily is not being affected as much. But for those people who are actually in physical spaces and are used to collaborating with other people in a physical space, kind of let's break that down a little bit, because I think that's a conversation that's worth having.
For sure. And it's definitely been difficult, Ding. You're spot on. Those of us that do work face-to-face are those that are primarily in the risk category. And of course, we're being dramatically affected by the reality that adult spaces, by and large, are still shut down across the country. Here in Nevada, the ranches are closed and have been closed since March. Some counties are approving locations to do non-sexual escorting, but not all counties have approved of this particular measure. Personally, I'm not 100% comfortable returning in that capacity, just because we don't have testing, and my county, Lyon County, doesn't have any provisions right now for that. So there is no option. And I say around the country because all of the strip clubs, all the dance locations and venues, those are all currently closed. So you have that entire population as well that's being affected. And unfortunately, sex workers fall under the adult category, which means we are unable to receive any sort of government support in terms of the Payment Protection Program or any of the SBA small business loans. So despite the fact that the government was happy to take a lot of monies from me in the form of taxes, they have offered me $0 whole dollars and 0 cents in recompense for no longer having a workspace, which is really fun. My voice is just dripping with sarcasm right now.
There's a little salt happening, just a little tap. So you said that your ranch is still closed, and so how have you been coping? Both, I guess, financially, as far as you're comfortable sharing, but also in terms of adapting your business model so you can practice your business in a safe and healthy way.
Yes, I had no choice but to pivot. I ended up starting an OnlyFans account and hopped on there, started educating myself as to some more of the various options for online sex work. I also started using the webcam to offer one-on-one sessions with guests and started to explore some of those various options as well. I already was on Patreon and creating content for YouTube, so I kind of just stepped it up, continued to work hard in that direction. But financially speaking, the reality is it's just a small drop in the bucket compared to what I was earning previously. And it's really problematic in the sense that I had a savings to fall back on. I've been able to get through this, but not everybody has that privilege. Not everybody had the ability to save like that. And so I worry and think as to my coworkers, what is their experience right now? How is somebody who's brand new to this industry being affected? And they're the ones I worry about far, far, far more so than myself. I've been, knock on wood, knock on everything. I've been very lucky that my guests have been supporting me. Folks have been very open-minded about pivoting to some of these online platforms. And it's really been a saving grace. It's what allowed me to keep going, as it were.
Yeah. I'm curious if you know anything about this. If not, certainly that's okay. But as we're seeing this kind of, for lack of a better word, shove of all of these sex workers into the online space, it feels like this is a very pertinent time to bring up SESTA FOSTA and kind of how that impacts it. Because at this point, this really is the only sphere that you can operate safely in or even legally in. And you're probably coming up against a whole lot of walls there too.
Absolutely. SESTA and FOSTA, for those that aren't familiar, SESTA and FOSTA stands for Stop Online Sex Trafficking Act, and FOSTA was the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, both of which were then passed into law. And unfortunately, as a result of that written language, it limits where sex workers are able to be online. For example, if I post about my OnlyFans on Facebook, that's going to get my Facebook account shut down. I'm not allowed to post over there. Not to mention the fact that it limits our Google search engine results. It limits where our content is allowed to live on the internet. It took down a number of the different websites that sex workers were using to get views. And I mean, we're not even done. I mean, that's really just the tip of the iceberg of the problems. And that's just SESTA FOSTA. We've got a new monster coming up through the ranks. This idea, the Earn It Act now that's popping up, which is impacting the way that sex workers have access to banking and are able to process payments. It's inevitably going to make it significantly more expensive for us to be able to just process the transactions, which then inevitably makes sex workers reliant upon different websites who then are able to take larger and larger cuts as a result of that limitation. So it's a really difficult time to be a sex worker anywhere in the world right now. It's real tough, but especially here in the States, it's just like we keep ratcheting up the difficulty mode. And you're right. With so many new workers coming into this space, there's a lot of misinformation that's floating around, a lack of awareness as to how do we use these platforms. I mean, I could go on a 40-minute tirade about how Bella Thorne was the worst thing to happen to OnlyFans ever. Yeah. She's canceled, by the way.
Oh, yeah. No, we had an entire episode a couple of weeks ago where we broke that down and got, we had a brand new OnlyFans user on to kind of give their take. And then I guess this kind of ties into my next question, which is, as hopefully, it feels like as like the longer this goes on, the more the phrase "when this is over" feels kind of like a fantasy that is
naive, yeah,
a little bit pie in the sky, just a tad. When this is over, or as we see this start to either become normalized with more testing so that places are able to open, or we get a vaccine, or in some way this starts to alleviate, what are some steps that maybe somebody who's interested in visiting a ranch that is brand new and open again what are some steps that they can take to make sure that they're, financially being supportive, making sure that they're keeping everybody's health in mind, and all those business considerations?
Yes. So we don't know what the structure will look like on the other side of this as to what the opening protocols will be. I have a feeling that there will either be a requirement as to vaccination, negative test results, something along those lines that folks absolutely are going to need to obtain in order to come to the location. Now, it's important to make note of the fact that, unfortunately, sex workers aren't legally able to quote exact rates online. So we're not able to say it's this much for this thing. We have to discuss all those details in person. So while you're planning your visit, have a little bit of flexibility with your budget, especially if you have a more luxurious experience kind of in mind. A good rule of thumb is plan in the 4 to 5 figure range, depending on how long you want to spend there, and you are going to have a very good time, and you're not going to have to worry about offending anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's all sorts of different things, all sorts of different experiences, and it really ends up being up to you to decide what kind of experience do you want to have. I recommend reaching out to a lady in advance and setting up an appointment with her. This way you have an opportunity to email back and forth, get to know her a little bit better, make sure that she's going to be a good fit for you, that she offers the service that you're actually interested in, especially if it's something kink or fetish related. And of course, make sure that the two of you have a good vibe for each other and that you're comfortable. Personally, I'm only available by appointment during non-pandemic times, and will probably only be available by appointment after the pandemic times and things are back to normal or whatever we're calling it.
Whatever that looks like.
Whenever that happens, whatever that means.
I mean, I can't even think past the election right now.
Sure.
Like, I can't even go into what are things going to look like on the other side of the pandemic. I'm like, Can we just get through the end of this year? My God.
Well, how have you been finding the transition to online only? Like, I recognize that you have, you were already kind of set up for it. You already had some understanding of how to navigate those spaces. But a lot of the sex workers I work with have been expressing to me that it just feels different. And as a therapist, I can tell you I desperately miss the experience of sitting down in my office, of sharing air with people. And we can still do beautiful work online. And I don't want to dismiss that at all. But I have to note that just on a nervous system level, it feels not the same. And there is something missing. And I'm curious what that experience has been like for you.
Yes. So I'm a big fan of body language. And online, we're limited to this: a head, shoulders, and maybe hands that come in and out of frame on occasion. Maybe somebody's house cat pops up. But I mean, you are so much more limited as to how much information you're receiving about the other person that you're connecting with. Like when I'm sitting with my guests, I'm paying attention to, are their legs fidgeting? Are they feeling comfortable? What's their breath rate like? Are they having like closed body language, open body language? How are they doing emotionally? And I use that to help kind of check in with someone. And it's very difficult not having that information on the other end of things. Not to mention the fact that in terms of the actual sex work and creating content, filming content, it is not the same performing for a camera lens as it is getting to connect with an actual flesh and blood person. Like, it feels real strange to be making quote unquote eye contact with a little piece of plastic. And it's like, I mean, I definitely know that I prefer my in-person type work. That's definitely where my passion is. That's where my heart lies. But you're right. We do have to make do with the options that we have available to us right now. And first and foremost, we all have a responsibility towards safety. So as much as I want to break quarantine as anyone does, I mean, safety first, and there'll be time on the other side.
Yeah, I definitely get that, and I'm not advocating for any rejection of that, but I think it's just really useful as we talk about how this thing is going on and on to remind ourselves that we're missing some things, that there are pieces of our day-to-day life that we might be coming up with beautiful substitutions to. And in some ways, I'm sure that there are benefits to that we're discovering, like new and interesting sides of ourselves and of our society and wherever else. But just to, I guess, maybe honor that sacrifice a little bit and really acknowledge how different and how challenging some of those differences can really be.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it too is that people's needs aren't getting met, especially that of physical touch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even for the deepest of introverts, we all have some level of need for socialization, intimacy, physical contact, and that's gone from whatever normal in March was to now a 6-month long non-existent point of contact. And I think a lot of people are getting more in touch with what their actual needs are and acknowledging the fact that no, we really do need to interact with each other, touch each other, hold each other, feel each other, as it were.
Sure.
Right. Certainly. I do have some more questions about COVID specifically and dealing with this kind of isolation that you're referencing and that lack of touch, or in some cases, if you're quarantining together, too much of it.
Yeah.
But we do have what I think is a very interesting call on the line, and I definitely want to make sure we get to that. So, Christy, would you mind connecting us up?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited as well to speak with Valentina. What can we do for you tonight?
Hi there. So I wanted to ask Alice about, so she was talking about her job as a luxury escort and how, sorry, I can speak directly to you. You were talking about how as a luxury escort, you provide more than just physical intimacy, that involves more personal intimacy, sometimes emotional support and things like that, where someone might be lacking those things in their life. I wanted to ask if you ever encountered situations where a client maybe was confused and thought maybe there was something more there for you than just a job. Or I guess also if it ever became more than just a job at any point for certain clients. So both of those questions, I guess.
And those are great questions indeed. So limits and boundaries are extremely important to establish in any sort of professional relationship, whether that be with a professional sex worker or a professional in the mental health space. And I actually borrow a phrase from the mental health profession, which is that of bounded intimacy. This idea that experience we're having is very genuine. All the things that we're feeling and talking about, they're absolutely valid and real, but they exist within this space that we've defined, that there's a start and there's an end to it. And within that, there's certain boundaries in place that prevent people from getting a little bit too carried away. So a great example of this might be a guest saying, wow, I wish we could just go away and I want to go to London with you and spend the whole rest of my life with you and get married. And I'm being like, wow, it's a really great fantasy to have. And I really hope that you find somebody that you're able to have those experiences with. That for connection isn't a negative thing, but I definitely reaffirm the fact that I can't be that person for them. First off, it's not legal for me to leave the state of Nevada with the guest. And second off, I'm a luxury companion. I'm not necessarily looking to go out and get married to any of my guests. And with that in mind, I've never had an experience kind of cross those boundaries because I'm very, very particular about the way that I establish the relationships with my guests. I can't be a good quality provider if I'm not giving somebody the tools to be successful with. And if I'm allowing things to get to the point where they're wondering, oh, maybe she's madly in love with me, I haven't done a very good job of establishing my boundaries.
Okay, cool. That's very interesting. And it's good to know that, it makes that a much safer environment for everyone involved.
Mm-hmm. In terms of safety too, like at the ranch, I actually have like a panic button available to me that I can hit any point in time if I'm wanting additional assistance. Thank goodness I've never had to hit it for like an actual human related emergency, only ever because there was a spider and yeah.
Real emergencies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, in Nevada, yeah, bugs can get pretty big.
I took my shoe off and threw it across the room to hit the button. But I was sitting on the bed. It like crawled out from underneath the bed, and I was no, I'm good.
Nope. We can stomach and talk about many things on this show, but spiders under the bed may be a step too far.
Yeah, no, that's like something out of a horror movie there.
Oh my goodness. That's awesome. Great question, Valentina. Thank you so much for calling in.
Oh, thank you for taking my question.
Absolutely.
For sure.
You have a great night.
All right.
I want to make sure to highlight something you pointed out, Alice, which is that these are bounded intimacy, but that they're also genuine experiences. I think that people often will see, movies or whatever else and just kind of assume that it's all play acting. It's all, fake in a way. And, we all have a customer service voice and whatever else. And I certainly don't want to dismiss that. But that doesn't mean that this is all fake, that you don't enjoy your time with folks or whatever else, or that these commodified relationships are somehow invalid or illegitimate and just play acting. There is an opportunity, perhaps not for the same type of like romantic love and intimacy that people may imagine, but for a genuine and meaningful connection to exist.
And I think that that's something that most people don't have enough of in their lives. They're good quality relationships, friendships, connections, ways that allow them to not just express themselves, but learn and grow as a person as well. I feel like every time I spend time with a new guest and hear a life experience they may have had, or they share a story with me, that it allows me to grow more as a person too. And so I think of it as almost an opportunity for everyone involved to kind of progress forward and grow.
Yeah, and there can be a lot of value in that sort of relationship that has those sort of guardrails on it, those safety opportunities. Because when you are working with a professional in a commodified relationship, which honestly describes therapy as well as it describes sex work in many, many ways, knowing that there is that other person who's responsible for guarding those boundaries can really free you up to express yourself and explore sides of yourself that you might not otherwise. So I think it's just really beautiful and important work.
Yeah, it's like a relationship with training wheels, relationship with bumpers even. Like, don't worry, we got you. You're not going to crash. And you figure too, especially for those that are perhaps virgins or never had a relationship before. I also work with folks that exist within that space. It is an opportunity to have those first experiences without judgment, with those training wheels on, where, hey, it's okay. I think every single person has picked up a condom and gone, wait, well, which way does this go? Hold on a second. Right? Like, everyone's been there and there's never any judgment.
I love also the fact that, and this is something I've said of my relationships in the past, just because it ends doesn't mean it wasn't useful and good and beautiful while it lasted. And I think we have this concept of relationships having to last forever or else they're a failure. And I've never subscribed to that. And it sounds like this is a really awesome way to kind of redefine what a good relationship is. If it has a defined beginning and ending, that isn't necessarily a point against it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really valuable point that you bring up, because we are used to the end of the relationship. We think of it as being this devastating thing, that it's ending for only negative reasons, and that we automatically assume all of these terrible negative values. And it doesn't always have to be that way. You absolutely have the ability to renegotiate a relationship if it's no longer meeting your needs, if it's no longer serving you, if it's no longer what you're looking for, if you've changed, if you've grown, whatever it so may be. And I think that we oftentimes hesitate to end things when we might even need to, because we're so afraid of this failure around, like, oh, the relationship is over. That's it. It's over. Throw in the towel. And it's like, no, why? Why be like that? It's so limiting.
I would also even suggest that if you have been in a relationship and it has been a relationship that has allowed you to grow into someone who no longer can be in that relationship, that by itself is a measure of success. It was a place where you were encouraged to become a new person and somebody who maybe now just needs different things.
Very much so. And especially right now in quarantine, we were talking earlier about almost too much time with someone, and that can be just as problematic as not spending enough time with someone. So for those who are quarantining with a friend or compatriot, make sure that you're also honoring your own personal needs, your alone time needs, whether that looks like kicking your partner out of the bedroom, being like, hi, you're sleeping on the couch tonight because if I don't get a night by myself, I'm going to kill you. Like,
yes.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out, like, our routines, our patterns that we've established to make sure these needs are being met have all been disrupted. And that's okay. We can navigate around that. We can develop new routines and healthy routines. But if we're not being intentional and aware of those needs, then they're going to get left out of that renegotiation of that new equation.
How we do something is just as important as actually doing it. It's the difference between pulling your partner aside and saying, hey, I'm going to need some alone time tonight, versus letting those emotions bubble over to the point where you're now having like conflict with someone and fighting with them. And I definitely have noticed that spousal tensions are kind of at dare I say, a peak these days.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of stress and tension and frustrations that are out there that could be contributing. I don't know. I mean,
a peak implies that they're not going to continue to increase or escalate. So you're flirting with danger there. But no, the advice that you're giving is great. So much so that I think we should probably jump on the lines before you put me out of work as a couples therapist. We've got a call from Dawn that I'd love to get your take on. Dawn, we'd love to hear your question. Thanks so much for calling.
Hi there. You guys have been kind of hitting directly around my question with a lot of your conversation. And so I think it's just one more step beyond what you guys have been talking about. And that is, what kind of personality does it take to be a successful sex worker? I mean, how do you maintain like your own individual self while still giving so much of yourself to somebody else that you're not in a long-term committed relationship with? I mean, you don't have that regular give and take that you would have in a relationship over time. You have a really shortened timeline. So you have to maybe have, I don't know, some kind of internal framework that you adhere to. I mean, is that, can you maybe shed some light on that?
I absolutely agree. Knowing what your needs are and ensuring that they are met is essential to being able to provide for the needs of others. I view myself as being a caretaker of sorts, and I strongly believe that you can't tend to the needs of others if you haven't first taken care of yourself. So in terms of personality type, you have to be somebody that loves yourself, that is very in touch with yourself and your needs. If you feel like you need to take a day of rest and recover and address whatever it is you so need, you've got to be willing to take that step back and take that time that you're needed. It's not selfish. It's very much so self-care, which is essential to being a sex worker. Additionally, you have to be intuitive to a certain degree. Not everyone is good at verbalizing what their needs are. And so sometimes you'll have to rely on your intuition and get a sense of where somebody may be, and then be able to offer them several suggestions based off of that previous experience. However, you can't really even begin to think about, how do I take care of this other person, if you haven't first started to take care of yourself. In terms of long-term relationships and how that give and take contributes to needs, Rather than being in a long-term relationship with somebody else, I view it as being in a long-term relationship with myself. I take care of my needs. I take care of my wants. I take care of my desires. And if those needs aren't getting met by me, I'm going to have a problem professionally. And so I'm very much so in touch with what I need on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And I'm not afraid to literally cancel an entire calendar's worth of stuff if I need a minute. I tend to be a little bit of an introvert, but that's not to say that it's a limiting factor to being a sex worker. It just means I might need a little bit more alone time than someone who is like a diehard extrovert. I do believe that any personality type could be a successful sex worker, so long as there's that introspection and moment to take a look at one's own needs are and address them.
That is really interesting. I never thought of it from that perspective. I have several friends who, you know, right out of high school or early in college, they would go and dance at a strip club or something. And even that seemed to be very, very hard on them emotionally. Like they kind of lost the sense of self that they had.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
I believe that comes from not knowing oneself in the first place and trying to discover oneself through the job. You have to have a very good sense of who you are before you come into that sexual space and start sharing with others, especially fresh out of high school. They probably haven't had an opportunity to develop that confidence of sexual self. I'm 30 years old and I've been doing this for 5 years now. And before that, I was traveling around and teaching another 10 odd years before that. So, I mean, it definitely takes time to develop that sense of self. I've long believed that the age for sex work should probably start at 21. Right now in Nevada, the age to become a legal sex worker is 18. Some counties it is 21, but in other counties it is 18. And I kind of think it should be set to 21. It just allows a little bit more time for that sexual maturity to finish happening, that sexual discovery. So this way, when somebody enters that space, they're doing so with a better sense of who they are, what their needs are going to be emotionally, how they can fulfill those needs before they can start exploring, how do I share this with others people? And keep in mind, too, I also advocate for things like I don't think anybody should be going to war until they're 21 years of age. I don't think that anyone needs to be smoking cigarettes until they're 21 years of age. And that's just based off of when our brains are done developing, not an arbitrary number, just science.
Just cause.
Just science, you know. It seems like something we could base policy on. I don't know. We should try it.
I don't know. It's a number. I pulled, reached into a bowl, pulled one out.
Great questions, Dawn. I love that. And definitely that feels like it's kind of pulling together some different threads we've been bringing up over the course of the evening. So thank you for calling in.
Well, thank you so much.
You have a great night.
Bye-bye.
I love how even after 2 years, I'm gonna just keep harping on that number. Our audience is still a little bit shy because as we got started this evening, like not a whole lot of calls. Everybody's a little nervous, but after a little bit of chit chat, all of a sudden the lines just start ringing. So if I may, I'm gonna go ahead and bring Malty into the conversation and see what he has to say. Malty, what can we do for you?
Hi, guys. Alice, I was wondering, it sounds like your girlfriend experience work would be attractive to clients that are demisexual. How much time does it take for you to build a rapport with a client that is more interested in what's behind your eyes than... Finish the sentence.
Yeah.
I know.
We got it. We got it.
All right.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. Don't worry. So when it comes to connection, I think that it starts long before a face-to-face encounter ever begins. that oftentimes looks like email being kind of that first point of contact, where I will email with somebody back and forth, sometimes for multiple weeks leading up to the time that we're actually planning on meeting and having that first encounter. You figure that allows us to get to know each other a little bit better, learn about the other person's interests and hobbies, and kind of discover who they are as a person, what's kind of laying up here in the brain. I definitely relate to demisexuality in the sense that I want to know who somebody is. I'm very into somebody's head, somebody's heart, and those are some of the things that I find most sexually attractive about someone myself. And so I find that oftentimes after 3-4 weeks of emails back and forth, I've got a pretty good sense of who somebody is, what their experiences have been, and I start to think of them as a friend. So by the time that we meet face to face, it's like just meeting a friend for the first time. Like, oh my gosh, we've known each other for how long? We've been emailing and texting and video chatting or whatever it so may be. And then finally having that opportunity to meet face to face, it just feels like a warm embrace from a friend.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I gotcha.
Wonderful. I do like the.
Question,
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Malty.
In your videos, your Coffee with Alice, you have a unique set of coffee cups hanging up on the back wall. Is there any story behind them?
Yes. So when I started Coffee with Alice, I reached out to my guests to send me in coffee cups, things that they thought were interesting, things that represented their local area, favorite movies, and I managed to amass a 300 plus cup coffee collection as a result. And even now, every so often, I'm switching the coffee cups that are in the background out to show off different mugs that people have sent me. Gosh, just today, somebody sent me one for Halloween. That's from the Haunted Mansion in Disney. Ah, Disney.
300.
Wow, I did not know that. That is amazing.
I have so many coffee cups. So many coffee cups, and yet somehow I'm almost always running out of coffee. Like, it's a problem. I drink a lot of caffeine.
Oh yeah.
I had cut you off, Fee. What did you say?
Oh, I was just going to say that I am a numbers person. I'm curious about the how long component that you brought up, Malty. You said you'd email back and forth for maybe a couple of weeks and actually get to know them. So would you say that maybe like 3 to 4 weeks of emailing and maybe 1 or 2 face-to-face conversations would be enough to get you to be like, okay, this person feels comfortable around me and I feel comfortable around them? Or is it really a person-by-person thing?
That sounds about right on average. Some folks would rather take their time. For example, some guests may choose to set up several video calls leading up to our in-person date, where we might sit and have coffee, dinner, take our dogs for a walk, have a conversation around a particular topic. And I'm super easygoing, so I'm always willing to accommodate any particular request that somebody has as far as, well, let's get to know each other. I'm like, great, you want to play Magic the Gathering? Because I will kick your butt with my elf deck, just saying. I've gotten to do so many fun things with people from, like I mentioned, Magic the Gathering. I've played Dungeons and Dragons with someone before. That was pretty cool. I went through somebody's favorite sci-fi novel with them. I enjoyed the heck out of that. I watched movies, all sorts of different ways of connection. And so it's really dependent upon the person as to what do they think they're going to enjoy the most.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for calling in, Malty. That's a great question. As a demisexual, I feel very seen right now. So thank you for the call.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
Man, I'm loving these callers. How about you, Alice?
Oh, absolutely. Demisexuality is far more common than most people realize. Oftentimes when people hear demisexuality explained, they like almost personally identify with it. They're like, wait a minute, but me too though. Wait, that there's a word for this? Like,
yeah. Wait, everyone doesn't feel this way?
God. Like, I'm also polyamorous, and I remember the first time that somebody used the word polyamory, and I'm like, wait a minute, say that again?
Hold up.
There's a word for this? You
There's
mean
a
I'm not
word?
just casually dating both of my best friends at the same time, and that there's actually like a real like community here that exists? What? Like, it's pretty cool stuff.
I remember the
It's
first time
almost
I
as
heard the
if, as a
word.
society, we have failed to educate people about sex, right? It seems like a
Gee.
problem. It seems like a problem.
It is.
I used the word compersion the other day, and
I love
not
that
a.
word.
Isn't it an amazing word? When I heard that, I was
that
like,
word.
I didn't know that was a word. And I used it the other day, just in a random conversation, and there were several people who caught up on like, "Are you poly?" Because only poly people know that word exists.
And people who watch this show, because the word compersion, of course, being
Being, oh, put me on the spot. Nice. Compersion is basically described as the opposite of jealousy. So instead of seeing a partner or somebody that you love very much experiencing something without you that they are finding a lot of joy in and feeling icky about it, you would instead feel joy for them and get pleasure from seeing your partner happy in a situation that doesn't necessarily involve you. And to me, the fact that for a while, I didn't think I was capable of that feeling. I was like, that seems foreign and strange to me, and I don't get it. But it's a muscle you got to exercise, and it's a really nice feel. It's a good feel.
just that idea of I'm happy, you're happy. The fact that you're happy is beautiful, and it fills me with joy. You know, we might be a little bit behind on this as well, but I should take this opportunity to just explain demisexuality. You know, we talked around the edges of it, but for folks at home, demisexuality is this idea that while you may be attracted to people sexually, you're not necessarily asexual or aromantic, that perhaps you take a little bit longer to warm up to the idea, that you need to get to know somebody a little bit more. Maybe the opposite of somebody who's looking for a one-night stand or that instant sexual connection. You're wanting to understand somebody a little bit more on a personal or on a human level before engaging with them on a sexual level. Does that line up with y'all's experience, with y'all's terminology?
Pretty much. I'd say the only difference is that, or the only clarification there would be, that doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't enjoy a one-night stand or that casual sex is off the table. Just that if you had a preference in relationship forms, it would be, oh, I know this person. I've connected with them on an emotional level, and that just makes the sex better.
I can agree wholeheartedly with that. I oftentimes think of a demisexuality as before I can commit to these feelings of attraction, I would like to find out a little bit more about you first, please, and not just look at a collection of bits and pieces and facial features and make a snap judgment as to whether this person is or is not attractive. Another very funny way of looking at this is, would your attraction to somebody change based off of their political affiliation? If somebody's political party is going to affect your attraction, you know, you might be interested in more qualities than just the physical, and it might be worth exploring that about yourself. I use politics as the example, as most people are like, oh, I could never sleep with somebody who's a insert political party here.
Right.
I don't even prescribe to a political party. I'm very, let's actually look at who people are.
So would that be demi-political?
Demi-political, yes. Demi-political.
Boo. We're moving on.
Okay. All right.
I do appreciate the sex terminology 101 lesson, though. As we've said, it's sorely lacking.
For sure. So this last segment here, we've got a couple more callers that we are going to take before the end of the show, so don't go away. But I do want to make sure we get down to some of these more practical tips and tricks, because if you read Alice's blog and the articles that she puts out, they're actually very informative, and they tie in a lot of psychology and science and biology and all of these different things to give you some really awesome, practical tips, either for yourself or with a partner, or if you are hiring an escort. So let's dive in to this first. And one article, I'm going to skip around a little bit here because we are a little short on time. One article that got me interested in particular is the benefits of bottoming. And specifically the section on, I think it's called, excuse me while I read off my script here, transient hypofrontality. And you called it subspace, the final frontier, which made me very excited to talk to you because, hello, fellow nerd.
I am a nerd.
But can you go into the benefits of bottoming a little bit, maybe especially talking to people who wouldn't normally see themselves as bottoms, or maybe societally have been told they can't be without sacrificing some core element of their gender?
Everybody can be a bottom. Let's just dispel that myth and throw it in the trash can. Every single body has the capacity to be a bottom without foregoing who they fundamentally are. Doesn't matter if you are a man. It doesn't matter if you are the CEO of a company. Doesn't matter if you are rich. It does not matter what you dress like or look like or what you are in your standard life. Your sexual self is an opportunity for exploration, and to not take advantage of it is such a shame. To step into the role of a bottom or the receiver of whatever the kink activity is that's so happening allows you to receive sensory information that you otherwise wouldn't normally get exposed to. What does it feel like to have a paddle impact across your bottom or the fall of leather over your shoulders? What does it feel like emotionally for you to kneel at somebody's feet? How does it feel for you to receive orders or commands from another person and be expected to promptly respond to that? Does that feel good? Or does that turn you on? What sorts of things are you experiencing? First and foremost, it's absolutely a learning opportunity. I guarantee you will grow as a person for having that experience. And then sexually, you have the possibility to learn so much about different things that you're going to enjoy. Think about it. Even just the simplest sensations, such as maybe scratching or biting that you otherwise never had an opportunity to experience, may make their way into like part of your bedroom fundamentals. And all of a sudden you learn something new about yourself that you're actually kind of into a little bit of breath play or a little bit of hair pulling. I don't know. It's so hard to put into like one short, concise phrase as to why you should try and be a bottom other than, yes, do it. Ask questions like, yes.
I'd imagine. Go ahead, Christy.
Just to say, you're also building out your experience as a top. You know, you're having walked through those experiences. You know what you're crafting. You're a chef who actually eats their own food. You know, if you are not having these kinds of experiences, you're not going to be able to craft them in the same ways. I think that everybody, as you said, no matter how you self-describe, whether you think of yourself as a top or as a dom or whatever other terms fit into your sexuality, there's a lot to be explored and understood.
Before you should ever pick up a toy and use it on somebody else, you should probably use it on yourself and have a good idea as to what that's going to feel like. How heavy is that flogger? How thick is that leather on impact? Is it too intense? Is this something that's maybe softer and a better warm-up tool? Well, if you're too afraid to use it on yourself or have it used on you, you're going to be lacking on so much information that's really going to benefit you. I'm really glad that you brought that up because there's this misconception that I am the most domly of dominance and I shall never bow before anybody. And it's like, buddy, I don't care how domly you are. If you have a brand new whip, you got to break it in first before you use it on somebody. And you should probably have gotten whipped at least once in your life before deigning to do the same to another person.
It continues to put some boundaries on these things, right? Because we're talking about play. Sex is just silliness, and we can dress it up, and you can have deep, dark, scary, dungeon, sexy sex, and that's great. You can be a domly dom, but if that's your entire identity, if your identity is so wrapped up in that and so fragile that you can't even conceive of yourself as being in a bottom situation, I don't know how much I really want to trust you to dom me.
Yes. And it almost speaks to a deeper emotional vulnerability that you're not willing to. Why? What's going on that you're not willing to explore that side of yourself? Is there something there that you're concerned and afraid of encountering? Because I actually think it would probably be very therapeutic and helpful and beneficial for you to go to those places that you probably aren't super thrilled about going to. And I definitely think everybody should have fun on both sides of the slash, not just top or bottom. Why not both? Then again, I'm a switch, so I mean, I'm like I've never decided on anything in my entire life. Like, I am polyamorous, I am pansexual, I'm a switch. Like, don't ask me to make decisions here, okay? My answer is going to be yes.
Yes.
I love it. Also, I'm officially co-opting Domly into my vocabulary. That is
You absolutely should. Domly dom is one of my favorite phrases. And like, you say that and you can almost see the person, they've got their held back a little bit too high. They absolutely are wearing a leather mercap and a very serious looking leather vest. Like, 100% without a doubt.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm glad we went to this space because that was the topic I was also going to bring up, is the experience of being on either side really is helpful when embodying the opposite, right? Whether that is a sub or a dom, if you have done the other thing, you know what you like, you know what feels really good and what doesn't, and then you can have that vocabulary to communicate. You might not even think about whether or not a flogger is too thick or too intense until you experience that. And then you're like, oh, this is a consideration. I need to ask about this. But another thing is aftercare. And this is such... I found that until I started dating and talking with people who were in the poly scene, people in the kink scene, this word was not used. Even if BDSM was flirted with and played with unofficially in the bedroom, aftercare was not a term. That wasn't an expectation. To expect it was to be clingy or needy. And I was so excited when I heard people actually using this phrase and talking about it as the important thing that it is. So can you talk a little bit about aftercare and what that is and why it's important?
Yes, I think aftercare is essential and non-optional. Aftercare is the both physical and mental unpacking of the experience that you just had. Physically, this looks like addressing the immediate needs. Do you need a snack? Is your blood sugar low? Do you need some water? Are you thirsty? Do you need a towel because you've just experienced adrenaline and you want to bundle yourself up under a nice warm blanket? Are you looking for physical presence? Was this an emotionally difficult scene that we just had? Do you want me to sit here and talk to you through this experience? Would you like some words of love, or would you simply like that physical presence? What kinds of things does somebody need to fully process through that experience in its totality? Because our experience doesn't just end the second that the flogger gets put down. Our nervous system has been ramped up and heightened, played with, flirted with, brought through this whole cascade of emotions, and it doesn't just all of a sudden end like a record that we just pick it up and put it back on the shelf. Like, there's a process that we go through in which we have to actually go through and unpack everything that happened. So this way we can then move forward onto that next great experience that we want to have. And of course, it's not limited to just the very moment after sex. Aftercare looks like the entire totality. So if this is an experience that left marks, bruises, in the case of any sort of play with sharps, such as scalpels or needles, you've got to follow the aftercare process through until that person is fully healed. All the marks are faded. We don't have to worry about any sort of infection, in any sort of injury. Like, you have to go through the whole thing. It is a commitment.
Yeah, well, and you called it non-optional, which highlights, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions, or one of the most important pieces of advice in this space that I'm always trying to push, which is just that even if you don't necessarily feel that it's necessary, maybe the scene wasn't as intense as you anticipated, or maybe your partner is saying, like, it's fine, like, I'm good. even if you are good, this is not necessarily just about like bandaging wounds, whether we're talking physically or psychologically. This is about establishing a routine and a pattern, because even if your experience wasn't overwhelming, by taking an opportunity in a moment afterwards to go through the motions, to actually do those steps, whether they feel necessary or not, whether they resonate with you or feel important or not, by actually having those kinds of intimate conversations and that reconnection and that soothing experience, you're setting yourself up not just to heal from this past moment, but to be ready for the next one. To know on a nervous system level that next time you get beat up, that there's going to be an ice pack and a shoulder to cry on, or whatever else. You're setting yourself up in really important ways. So I encourage people, even if you are just trying something out, even if it doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal, to at least provide some space for that kind of aftercare, not for today, but for tomorrow.
Yes. It's like toy cleaner. You clean your toys before you use them. You clean your toys after you use them, regardless if they look dirty or not. You still go ahead and go through the process. It's part of it, package and parcel. And aftercare is the same way with any sort of emotionally charged activity in the bedroom. There should be aftercare. It doesn't even have to be kinky. If there's been an emotional peak, if there's something that happened that is taking you out of your standard sex routine, take a moment to honor that and acknowledge the fact that your needs are probably going to be different than what your needs are after every other time you have sex, because something here is different.
Right. Again, communication is so important, and being able to say, hey, I know we didn't do anything out of the ordinary tonight, but I'm feeling a little emotionally raw. Can we talk about it? Or can you just hold me for a little while? I think that's so important. We have 2 more calls on the line that I definitely do want to get to. So, Christy, do we want to jump into these last 2 calls?
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited to speak with Alice in Oregon. Alice, what's on your mind? Olive, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Hey, how's it going, you guys? How are you?
Good. What can we help you with tonight?
So, I am a feminine, non-binary person. I was originally born in a female body. I'm curious about how to begin the process of getting into a polyamorous relationship.
Yeah. Help me, Olive, just a little bit, and let me apologize for completely swapping out your name. How are these things connected? Not to say that your gender isn't relevant to your romantic and sexual journey, but help me put those pieces together a little bit here.
It's just, I know I sound confusing. I'm sorry. You butchered my name, but I don't care. It's common. But the point of the matter is, it's just I've never been in a multiple person relationship before. I have in the past, but it was only for a couple of days, and it really didn't go well. So I wanted to start anew and try again, so I could figure out how to go about getting myself partners without feeling like after the relationship that I was first in that they hate each other now, and one accused the other one of cheating, and this whole situation. I just want to be able to get in a loving relationship. That's all I want.
Yeah, well, we're excited that you're taking this on, that you have learned this about yourself, and that you're excited to explore and learn more. You know, I'll let you know that I've actually got a video answering this question in as much detail as I can that I'll make sure to put in the show notes for this episode. But the crux of all of that is to learn your shit. You know, before you get out on the road, you have to read the driver's ed book. Before you actually start driving on the highway, you have to have a little bit of an escort and some assistance. So make sure that you are reading every book that you can, that you are, jumping on to whatever way you like to learn, whether that's a podcast or a YouTube video or whatever else. you want to not only protect yourself by making sure that you're educated and you know what's going on, but you don't want to get out on the roadway and start crashing into other cars. I think that that's one of the most easily missed aspects of polyamory, is that our society, as we've been highlighting all night, has not done a great job of serving you here. It has not been explaining these ideas to you or creating a culture to really help you navigate all of this. That's not to say that polyamory is inherently more difficult or more dangerous than any other form of love or romance or sexuality, but we don't have pop songs about it. Right? Like, there aren't any great, beautiful Julia Roberts movies that explain to us how to walk through these kinds of experiences. And you don't have those emotional and like cultural touchstones to rely on. So you really have to work at educating yourself. So that would be the place that I would recommend to start, is just reading every book that you possibly can. Dedeker Winston, a friend of the show, wrote The Smart Girl's Guide to Polyamory, and that might be a good place to start. There's a number of other great books that we'll make sure to have some links to in the show notes for you to take a look at. What other advice would y'all recommend, V and Alice?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, I am brand new to polyamory myself. So I am not very experienced either, but still in there swinging. I think that for me, there are two things. And the first thing kind of comes off of what Christy was saying. When I was first starting to learn about polyamory and that, oh, this might be something I'm interested in, there was this pervading sentiment among a lot of poly people that polyamory is actually more natural than monogamy, right? And it's like, oh, well, we're closely related to bonobos, and bonobos are polyamorous, so we should be too. And while there might be a case for that, that doesn't mean that it's going to come more naturally to you. Like, it's not like, oh, you don't have to think about it, just follow your instincts. I think initially that's kind of the direction I went, and didn't work out very well. So certainly, while it is just as valid and natural, and perhaps even more so in some senses than monogamy, that does not mean that it doesn't take work and research, just like Christy said. Also, as valid as a goal of multiple partners is, I would encourage you to start slowly and start with one and have that conversation with them and really build that foundation, and both of you be open to adding more people in as you find them naturally, whether that's going on dates online or, you know, maybe a mutual friend, whoever you end up being with. Just make sure that the goal in the end isn't, I want more than one partner. It is, I want to build individual, deep, and meaningful connections that grow naturally, ideally in a way where we can all share in that emotion together.
I totally feel that. I am adorably crazy in a great positive way, because I'm a little weird in the best manner possible. So I think I'll do well since I'm only 20.
Well, you've got plenty of time to figure this out then.
Yeah, that's an important point, to take it slow and to recognize that you don't need to be polyamorous and have like these wild experiences that you can absolutely have. You don't need to have them today or tomorrow. You know, there's time and opportunity to feel these things out as you go. But I'm sorry, Alice, please weigh in.
Yes, I come bearing more literature suggestions. More Than Two is a fantastic kind of beginner's primer to polyamory. And as far as what Vi was talking about, as far as like bonobos, if that sort of information is interesting, you might prefer Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, really interesting one. And there's a third one I was going to recommend as well. I'm totally coming up on a blank here. It'll come back to me. Sex at Dawn. That's the other one I'm thinking
Dr.
of.
Christopher Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah, or Susan Block was on the show to talk about the bonobo way. If you want to explore things through that direction, everybody loves The Ethical Slut with Janet Hardy and Dorothy Easton.
Everybody loves The Ethical Slut.
So there's a lot to work from. I don't want to overload you with too huge of a reading list, but I think that the consensus here is read, educate yourself
Yeah.
on this, because you can hurt yourself and others by being careless in the way that you jump into these things. And I don't think any of us want to scare you off. I think all three of us identify as polyamorous. So we're here. The water is warm. It's wonderful. Jump in and join us. Just make sure you learn how to swim before you get in the deep end.
Yep, built a
Oh,
strong
don't worry, I
foundation.
Awesome.
That's
Wonderful.
awesome.
Oh, great talking to you, Olive. Thank you so much for calling in tonight.
You have a great night.
All right. We have a special guest who just called in. Do we want to take this random person who certainly none of us know?
While you're being coy, let's start to talk to Matt Dillahunty. What can we do for you, sir?
Yeah, don't call me a special guest. I'm just a regular caller like everybody else. It's just I can't disguise my voice particularly well. How are you?
Doing good tonight, enjoying the conversation. What can we help you with, Matt?
Well, I was sitting in my chair and I was about to reach over and grab my phone and send V a text message about a question I had earlier today. And I was like, hey, they're on Secular Sexuality now. Just call.
There you go.
There's a lot of antiquated media with bad ideas that have fallen by the wayside, classic old movies that now are viewed as just terribly sexist or insensitive. And you had made a comment on Twitter, and I have been like obsessing on Twitter for the last 2 days or 5 days or whatever it is.
Mhm.
I've lost track of time.
Time gets lost on Twitter.
Reply.
Well known.
Yeah, I was going to reply with a link to the video for the song Origin of Love from Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And then I realized, like 2 seconds after I clicked to post it, that this song could be viewed as completely grossly insensitive to non-binary people. Not that this was something that was in the zeitgeist, when Hedwig was around, and certainly not when Plato wrote Symposium.
Right.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I don't think it would be like a problem for trans folks at all, because it's just talking about gender. But of course, because it's binary by its very nature, I wondered what non-binary people's view of Origin of Love was, and I will hang up and listen to your answer.
Thanks for calling in, Matt. It's a good question and touches on a larger topic as well that we can certainly jump into very briefly. Thank you. I will admit that I have not seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So I know the song vaguely, but it's certainly a film that is on my bucket list and has been for a while. And I'm ready for the hate in the comments. Okay. I realize, I get it. I grew up under a rock. Okay.
We're going to take our breakfast at Tiffany's away.
Please don't. It's the only thing keeping me tethered to this realm. I think that the song, as far as I remember, I was just excited to have like the concept of like another gender, another option even mentioned. So like to me, that was the exciting part. And I didn't necessarily feel ever like offended by it. And in general, I think that I can't speak for all non-binary people or all people who identify in some way genderqueer. But personally, I'm generally very forgiving. If it's not meant in a malicious way and it's outdated and it came out decades ago and the conversation wasn't where it is now, that's fine. Like it might need to come with a caveat in the same way I said, I love Breakfast at Tiffany's, sans the cringeworthy appearance by Mickey Rooney, right? Like you have to call that out and say like, that was horrible. Also, it's a good movie overall. And in the same way, if you feel the need to say, hey, I'm aware that there are some really outdated things happening here, that's always appreciated. And it shows that you are cognizant of the other person you're talking to and that you understand like where the conversation is now. But I don't see any reason to get offended at core pieces of culture, especially if they were trying at the time and maybe just fell short because the terminology wasn't there or because a broader understanding of gender wasn't fleshed out yet.
Mm.
Yeah, so for folks who are not Hedwig and the Angry Inch fans, this is a little bit like examining words like tranny in Rocky Horror Picture Show, right? Like so we can recognize that these pieces of art have incredible meaning to very marginalized groups, while also themselves being very imperfect in a lot of meaningful ways. It doesn't mean we can't glean that beauty and enjoy it for what it is, while still acknowledging that, yeah, there's some problematic aspects.
Yeah, we don't know that something is problematic until we learn better, both individually as well as societally.
Sure.
And I feel like if we are so concerned with what has happened previously, we no longer are focused on the growth and the movement forward and the advancement forward. If we're constantly in this space of retrospection where we're always looking and taking a look and examining everything that's previously happened, at a certain point, we do have to acknowledge, yes, we know better now. We can do better going forward. And I am sure that there are things that all of us have said, could be even saying today, that in 50 years from now, we'll look back on it and go, aha, now we have better knowledge and better education.
Right.
We only do the best we can in the moments that we have.
I fully agree with that. Kind of on this same subject, we do have one last caller from Japan. So I would love to talk with Secular. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Doing good. What can we help you with tonight?
Good. So I have a few questions. Okay. So I understand there's a difference between sex and gender. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, can you kind of maybe explain to me what it means to be non-binary? Because I've looked up a few things and whatnot, and a long time ago, I kind of watched this documentary about like the genders. It was particularly talking about Polynesian cultures and how they have a third gender.
Yes.
And so I kind of understand that, but I don't understand maybe what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think certainly we have whole episodes on this. I would definitely suggest that you check the one out with Rudy B. We put out a couple of months ago. We can link that in the description as well. But the short answer is non-binary is an umbrella term for a lot of different identities. So while I can certainly let you know the basics and what being non-binary means to me, I certainly am not talking for everybody. You would have to ask the individual person in the same way that asking, well, what's a man, right? Like that's going to vary based on the individual that you ask. So for me, the basics are that sex relates to biology. And it is a biological thing that we can measure from various different ways. And that itself is bimodal, so not as binary as people would have you believe. But again, the American sex education is kind of crappy. Gender, on the other hand, is tied to sex in that one is layered on top of the other. In the same way you would say, oh, well, blondes are dumb, right? You would say, oh, blondes are not that bright. You're taking a biological characteristic, yes, that person has blonde hair, and then making a societal assumption about them based on that characteristic. And it might be correct, it might not be correct, it might be offensive. But you're basically doing that when you're talking about sex and gender. So gender is the societal construct of how people with certain biological characteristics are expected to act. And for me, being non-binary is kind of just breaking away from that expected structure. For me, there were two boxes, there was really only one box presented to me because of the characteristics I was born with. And I realized I didn't fit in that box. And then I looked over at the other box that was an option, right? And it's the, am I a man? Is that what I am? No, not that either. That doesn't work. So I must be something else. And then that's where the non-binary comes in. And that means that the way I view myself and my own, the way I present in the world and the way others see me, the way I dress, the way I talk, the inflections that I use, all of this kind of combines to create this like amalgam that is my gender. So does that answer your question? The basics, at least?
Okay. Yeah, kind of, but I then have a few add-on questions to that then.
Well, let's get to one more. We do have to wrap the show up, so pick the best one and we'll try to tackle that.
Okay, all right. Maybe then I should call back late another time. But because like I kind of want to say like, is it more about forming? So I don't want to sound like I'm ignoring you. I just want to ask this question. Like, is it about forming your own identity? Because when you said like things like not having to conform to like society and stuff, like the person that came to mind was Eddie Izzard. And he does this one comedy sketch where he's like, these aren't women's clothes, these are my clothes. You know, so is it more, I don't want to, sorry, please just tell me, is it about forming your own identity and dealing with society like that? Yeah.
I am happy any day of the week to be compared in any way to Eddie Izzard, so I'm good. I think that personally, it is about finding my own identity outside of what society expects of me, because I tried that way and it didn't make me happy. It didn't make me feel like me. And so I'm trying something else. I'm trying something different. But there's also a broader context here, which is very much along those lines of, these aren't women's clothes, these are my clothes. We gender things a lot, at least in the English language, at least in Western cultures. We really tend to say, these are boys' things and these are girls' things, and they don't overlap and they're not, capable of being mixed and matched. And there's really no reason for that as far as I can tell. It is a very strange and archaic way of looking at the world, and it stymies the ability for people to be individuals and really explore fully who they are without having to worry about being made fun of or being bullied. So it is a personal identity thing for me, but it is also a broader worldview about how we should look at the world. If you love girly clothes and love to be very feminine and high femme, that is awesome. And you should continue to do that and pursue that if that's what makes you feel like you. But you can only speak about yourself, right? You can only say, this is what I like, not this is what you should like.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. I mean, you said you need to wrap up. Maybe I'll call back next week and ask more.
Please do call back. I'd love to continue this conversation with y'all.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, we are wrapped up. We ended up getting quite a few calls the last half of the show. I like that.
See, sex workers don't bite without consent. We're very proud.
There you go. We just have to, demystify it a little bit. Talk about it honestly. Be open. And Alice, you did such a wonderful job of that tonight. I really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Sincerely.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure to be here with the both of you. You're both so well spoken, intelligent, articulate. It's really been a treat.
Awesome. Let's throw up some of your links and some of the places that people can find you. Alice is transitioning to online work. Let's support her as much as we can.
Yes.
Let's get her Patreon up there and subscribe to her YouTube channel and check out her OnlyFans. Like this is how she makes her money. So let's help her do that.
Yes, I'm all over the internet. Google me, you will find me. Please do email me anything and everything under the sun, alicelittle@thealicelittle.com. It is my pleasure to answer folks' questions, answer their concerns, discuss all sorts of manners of things. I'm a very open book, to say the least.
I love it. And then can we get a shot of the crew cam? Because we have an amazing crew that's been working really hard tonight. Love you all. Thank you so much for doing everything that you do. Christy, where can people find us? Are we anywhere on the internet?
Yeah, we're on Twitter at Secular Sex. We, of course, have the fan group on Facebook. I want to make sure to mention, in addition to that, our Teespring store, where you can buy all of your Secular Sexuality and other ACA merch, including coffee cups, by the way, which you may choose to send to somebody you admire. Whatever else, I don't know. Whatever you want to do with your Secular Sexuality coffee cup. But yeah, we've got some great options for you. I also want to make sure to mention the fact that we have listed maybe a dozen or so different books and resources and things along those lines. Those are going to be in the show notes to this episode. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or finding us in your favorite podcasting app, we'll make sure that there are links to all of those things. I think there's a lot of great resources to check out, and as we kind of highlighted, these are topics where you need to do your homework. There's a lot here that you want to make sure you know before you just dive right in. So educate yourself and let us know how we can help. If you continue to have questions, of course, we're here to take your calls. In between times, we'd love to have an opportunity to receive your voicemails, to receive your emails. All of that information is here, and we'd just love to keep the conversation going.
Awesome. And in the meantime, Christy, what should people do to take care of themselves during quarantine?
To take care of themselves during quarantine, I think everybody out there should take a nice, quiet moment to themselves and give themselves a big old orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?